Hello everyone, welcome back. I'm David Mulgrew and this is part 3 of learning Git with GitHub Desktop. I am going to, we're going to start off by doing a little bit of talk on Git Ignore and how it works, just to show it in isolation. And then we'll talk a little bit about setting it up with a game engine. I'm probably going to have to switch to a different system for that, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. I want to keep this one simple for the moment. So you'll see from our last one, we're in our demonstration repository, and all this has got inside it is a README file. So what we need is, depending on our environment and what we're programming with, there's often a lot of files that we don't want to sync, that are a waste of time. In Unreal, as an example, there are a lot of compiled files that if you re-download the project, you can compile them anyway, so there's no point downloading them. There is a lot, sometimes you'll have a file here with an API key or a password that you don't want to be synced and you don't want to be included in the online. And the question is sort of, how do we deal with that? It's something called a Git Ignore, and a Git Ignore is at its base level, it is a list of files that we want Git to not sync. We want Git to pretend they don't exist. So I'm going to give you an example. We're going to create a new text file, and I'm going to do my secret password dot text, and I'm going to open it and go, my password is cloud, and I'll save it. So once I've saved it, we're going to go back to Git, and you'll notice it's including this in Git. If I commit this now, it will appear on the online repository. And imagine this was actually my password or something else secret. So if I'm going to hit commit, and I'm going to show you this, I'm going to hit push. Not actually my secret password, so I'm not really concerned. And if we open GitHub and I'll refresh the page, this is the repository we're at, you'll notice my secret password .text, and I click on that, and oh no, anyone who can find this repository can now see my password. That's a problem. So how do we deal with that? I'm going to create a new one to show this with. I'm going to do text document. I'm going to do my very secret password. And I'm going to open that. I'm going to do my password is Git. That is the most secure password. 3 letters. Right. So if we go back to GitHub Desktop, it's offering to create it again. Now, you can write a Git Ignore manually. You can create the file and you can type it all yourself. But one thing you can do with GitHub Desktop is if I right-click it, I can ignore file. You will get options here as well if it's in a folder. So if I can ignore just this file. I can ignore all files of this type. And I'm going to move it into a folder to show you this. We're going to new folder. I'm just going to leave it as new folder. I'm going to move it there. So now, if I pull this out slightly, it's in new folder. If I right click it, we actually get an option to ignore the folder. And if it was in a deeper folder structure, we would have an option to ignore any folder in that hierarchy, not just like the top one. But I'm going to move it back because I don't really need it in a folder for this. So I'm going to move it back and delete that folder. We'll get a little bit more into Git and folders in a second. So I'm going to right click it and ignore. You'll notice the file itself disappears. And now Git is telling me I have a Git Ignore. And it's saying ignore this file. And if I go back to this folder, you'll see I now have a .git ignore folder. And if I open it with Notepad, it's just a list of files. It's literally just a list of. It can get more complicated, and this is why I'm showing you this first. But it can get more complicated. Now, if I do need to commit the Git Ignore, and we'll push that. And now anyone using our repository, it will ignore those files. So that's your Git Ignore. Now I'm going to have to quickly change environment. Be right back. So here we are in the system. I just want to address one thing before we get into Unreal and the hoops we have to jump through. So when we first saw that welcome page where we could create a new repository, those buttons exist through the menu on this, but we're not going to see that welcome page from here. What we'll usually be using is we click on this top menu and go to add. We can either clone, create, or add existing repository. So Unreal has an awkward tendency in fact, I'll just show you how this works because it's probably the clearest way. So there's two things we want. We need to make sure we have the correct folder structure when we create our project, and we have a .git ignore file. Now, there's two approaches we can take for this with Unreal. With most pieces of software, this is really simple, but Unreal is a pain in the backside. So we'll show Unreal because it's a good demo for how we deal with some of the hoops we have to jump through. So I can either create the repository first in Git and then go to Unreal, and then I'll have to do some juggling with the folder structure. Or I can create the project first in Unreal and add a repository, but then I'll have to manually add the Git Ignore. You can do that by Googling Unreal Engine Git Ignore. So I'm going to do it the other way. We're going to create the repository in Git first. So I'm going to go to this menu at the top. I'm going to go Add, Create New Repository. I'm just going to call it Test Project. See, the local path is C drive Git, and then it's going to automatically create me a folder in Test Project. And the important thing now is I'm going to create a Git Ignore. This predefined one for Unreal Engine. We'll take a look at that before we add any Unreal. I'm going to go create repository. I'm not going to publish this one at the moment. I'm just going to show in Explorer. So you'll see in this, it's got a Git attribute. It's got a .git folder, which has some stuff Git sets up in the background. You couldn't see that on the test one before because it's a hidden file. It was there. It's just, you don't need to worry about what it does. Just leave it alone. Let it do its stuff. So we've got this Git Ignore, and I'm going to open that in Notepad. I'm on the wrong monitor, so I'll bring this down. And I'll zoom this in a bit so you can see it better on the video. So you'll see there is a long list of stuff in here. So with our sample, we just had one file in here. This has quite a long list. For people who are not familiar, this symbol is a wildcard. It means ignore all files that end in this file extension. So this will ignore all SLO. Notice this is for compiled object files. So these are compiled files that Unreal will generate from the project. You don't need to save them to Git. They can be quite large. And Unreal will just regenerate them when you open a new project. Again, we don't need exe files, so no wildcard exe. Nothing in the .visual studio folder if we have it. We actually don't at the moment, but it will appear once we create our project. So that's our Git Ignore, and it generates that for you. Like I say, you can download that from the internet. If you just Google Unreal Engine Git Ignore, you'll find this actually on GitHub, and you can just copy paste it into a new Git Ignore. So we've got our test project folder here. Now we deal with Unreal's pain in the backside. What we want is our Unreal project to go in this location, which at the moment is C drive Git test project. I'm going to copy that just to make sure I've got it. I'm going to go to games, blank project, and I'm going to, we can browse to it or we can type it in. I'm going to go to test project and select, and I'm going to call it test project. So here's the awkward thing. At the moment, Unreal will place this project in a folder that is called the same thing as the project name. So it will be in project location, C drive Git test project / test project. And we don't want that. We want it to be at the folder we're trying to put it in now. So what we'll do is, if I do this, if I try and put it in Git, knowing that it will generate the subfolder for me, it says I can't put it there because there's already files there. It knows test project already exists and there's files there. So we have to jump through a few hoops. So we're going to put it in test project. I'm going to delete the backslash and hit create. I'm going to let Unreal go through its nonsense. This is how fast Unreal should open. And I'm going to go to our Git repository. So we're in C drive Git test project. You'll notice Unreal has very nicely put us a folder called test project, which actually has the project in. This is annoying because it's now in the wrong place. The problem with this is our Git Ignore will not include files in the test project folder. So we need to make sure it's in the correct location. So we'll have to close Unreal for this. And I'm going to go into the test project folder. I'm going to Control X to cut. And I'm going to paste it in our repository folder. And then I'm going to delete the test project folder. And now what you'll see is GitHub Desktop has picked up these files. It's got some configuration files and it's got the U project. All the other stuff here, all the other stuff is generated by the engine. And if I deleted them, it would rebuild them. So if I do, I'll leave config alone. But if I delete content, derived data, immediate, and saved, and then I try and open the project, notice they reappear. And it will rebuild them for me as it does it. And this is why this saves us a huge amount of time going back and forth. So if I look at how big this is, for example, now, downloading this is going to be much faster. So if I look, this is a really, really tiny project. It hasn't been ran yet, so that makes sense. But what you'll find if I look at so content, derived data, intermediate, and saved. If I look at an existing project and I do how big are they? This is 6.19 gigabytes. But if I go content, derived, so these are the four that we don't need. And now I check the properties. Now it's only 2.36 gigabytes. So that's going to take a third of the time for me to download. And when I open the project, it will only take a few seconds to rebuild, or should on a decently powerful machine. Your mileage may vary. So if I open test project again, and that's it. In the next video, we're going to talk about some basic team stuff like branching and how we'll probably get a little bit into how we do pull requests. Just as a reminder, though, do not forget to commit the work you've done when you create an Unreal. Don't forget. We'll do initial commit. It would help if I can spell. Initial commit, and then we will hit publish, and publish will push it for us, but we need to make sure we hit push when we've been working. So don't forget to do that. See you next time.